Okay, so that seems to be working. Okay, we're live. Excellent, brilliant. Whew.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yesterday I was walking down the street and like the road between like my house and the center of town was
Mhm.
completely blocked with like agricultural like huge tractors.
Oh, nice.
So I googled, and yesterday apparently Germany-wide farmers were having a huge protest because last year a petition passed. I think it was in just in Bavaria for like new measures for environmentalism and for it was built as the Save the Bees petition, but it was sort of a bigger
Okay.
package about environmentalism and fighting the the climate change and all of that stuff. Oh wait a
Mhm.
second, I forgot. I haven't shared my screen yet, have I? Okay, so
Yeah.
they rolled up into town with literally, I think, almost 1,000 tractors, and it was absolute
That's
chaos.
wild.
That it was amazing. Wait a sec, there was a yeah. I'm just gonna play this without sound because it's all in German. But yeah,
Sure.
they came big.
Nice. I
Yeah,
love those. I love those. When the farmers protest and they bring all of their equipment, those are
yep.
like the best ones. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh man. Yeah.
and all the signs were like, no farmers, no food, no future.
Yeah.
And basically
Yeah.
their gripe is that all this environmental legislation is passed, and their margins are pretty thin already. So if you take away further subsidies and further like the basically their ability to make a living, sooner
Hmm.
or later we're going to run out of food. And it's just super impressive seeing 1,000 tractors in town.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I don't know that much about,
Hmm.
this may surprise you. I
Yeah.
don't know that much about German agricultural legislature.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it particularly restrictive in Germany?
I didn't think so. Like in particular in Bavaria,
Mhm.
the farmers have a pretty big lobby because that's sort of our we're very conservative, and the Conservative Party and the farmers had a like a real like they were hand in hand the whole time. So I was kind of surprised by this, but
Mhm.
very recently there has been a lot of environmental legislation been passed, specifically about where you're allowed to like spray and where you're allowed to spray pesticides and how much and how little, and like there's a lot of paperwork going on, especially for like the EU.
Mhm.
So it seems
Hmm.
that is kind of getting down to crunch time, and there has been like a real for decades now that family farms are dying out. I have heard that since probably the 90s.
Sure. Sure. It's
So
it's
yeah.
interesting because we find ourselves at one of those like
Hmm.
key moral crossroads
Yeah.
for like leftists who are also
Hmm.
environmentalists. Like
Yeah.
we talk a lot about closing factory farms
Hmm.
and finding a new way to do agriculture,
Yeah.
but then there are 1,700 tractors
Yeah.
in this protest because we're impacting their livelihood.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, like, you know, where's the balance here
Yeah.
moving forward? Um,
Because these are workers, like they literally work the land, and we
yeah,
can't like keep. I mean, it's kind of undermining it that they roll up with literally like tens of millions of tractors to
sure,
like
sure,
But also there has been dying family farms, which I think it's in the U.S. It's a real problem as well. Like bigger and
yeah.
bigger conglomerates springing up, and the family farm, the traditional way of doing agriculture, is completely dying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what we see is the type of laws that we pass
Hmm.
in America are designed so that it's easier for large corporations
Yeah.
to run agriculture and
Hmm.
meet these standards,
Yeah.
and it becomes oppressively expensive for smaller farms.
Yeah.
and it forces a lot of small farms out of the
Mm-hmm.
market. Um, they get sort of priced out by regulation.
Yeah.
And to me, it's not really a matter of like, oh, so then the regulation is bad and we should
Mm-hmm.
free up the farming market. To
Yeah.
me, it's just a matter of, no, we need to reinvest in
Mm-hmm.
agriculture more as a society
Yeah.
to subsidize those regulations so
Mm-hmm.
that no one goes out of
Yeah.
business for an
Like
environmental policy.
it can't be punitive, you know. You can't just like
Mm-hmm.
take away someone's way to make a living. That's obviously not the
Mm-hmm.
point of it. But also, you can't, keep going as you are until time runs out, basically. And
Yeah, exactly.
I think the deep dive into like far right politics has really brain poisoned me because that guy, like, what's that necklace? What's going on there?
Yeah, and there's another guy I saw waving like a some sort of a black flag situation,
Yeah,
and
like,
it's like, what's on the flag? What's on the wait?
yep, yep.
It's difficult, especially knowing
Hmm.
like agriculture worldwide,
Yeah.
maybe not worldwide, but
Hmm.
agriculture in Eurocentric
Yeah,
countries
yeah.
is always dominated by
Hmm.
conservative movements
Yeah.
or reactionary movements,
Hmm.
and it makes you wonder who's involved in organizing
Yes.
this protest
Yeah.
and what is it they're pushing for, what is it they're pushing against,
Hmm.
and what are the actual numbers that we're talking about here,
Yeah.
that it's like how much of profits are being eaten up, how many more costs are going up,
Hmm.
and how many of these are representing family farms versus some sort of corporatized
Yeah.
farm. um, that's not to say that the complaints of the workers themselves would be invalid if
Absolutely.
they worked at a farm
Yeah.
versus like if it was their family's own farm.
Hmm.
It's just to say like it's these are complex topics.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, farmers come off of, from what I understand, 2 really bad years, like really low harvest, because of extreme weather. You know
That's right.
that,
That's the flag.
yeah. So basically, we had like 2 years ago, we had a massive drought basically all summer long, and harvest was terrible. And this year, we had like a really hot, sunny spring, and then a really like terrible summer, like lots of rain, not a lot of sunshine, which meant that harvest was bad. So, and that is extreme weather is a sign of climate change and would necessitate the kind of legislation that they're now protesting against. So it is just I don't know. It's just complicated.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's solidarity with the
Hmm.
striking workers,
Of course.
um, but also like, what are they asking? Are they asking for a subsidy to help them meet
Hmm.
the environmental standards?
Yeah.
Or are they asking us to revert environmental standards that are like 100% necessary?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. That's another good question.
Yeah.
How do you think the EU does with regard to environmental issues? Has it been good in general? Do you think?
No.
No.
No. Because the thing of the EU is they are very pro business, very pro.
Mm-hmm.
The whole like freedom of movement. It's not actually freedom of movement of people. It's freedom of movement of workers. So
Yeah,
everything is
freedom of
basic,
trade.
yeah,
Yep.
freedom of trade, freedom of movement of workers, and like everything is moved towards trade and making money and moving money across borders. And
Yeah, that probably doesn't
no,
incentivize
no, it doesn't.
those environmental programs very
No,
much.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, so that lends a little bit even more credence
Yeah.
to the protests. Like,
Hmm.
chances are it's being done there similar to the way it's being done here, though, where these regulations are really designed in a way that corporations can meet the standards
Yeah,
and
yeah.
small scale farmers
Hmm.
can't meet the standards. And
And also with
in
modern,
general,
yeah,
just on principle, I favor small farmers.
yeah, yeah. Oh God,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And also like the way farming is being done, it's basically much more automation and like always like bigger machines. Like it's so like huge investments. That's absolutely prohibitive for like a family farm. And also like seasonal workers
Mm-hmm.
coming in from other countries with like such low wages. Your average family
Mm-hmm.
farm who have to pay for the tractor probably for years every month to like be able to afford it. They can't afford that. They can't keep up with that. And people aren't willing to pay or aren't able
Yeah.
to pay more
Yeah,
for food. So but yeah. So the big
yeah,
demonstration is like
those are
the
all very good points.
yeah. It's just like I don't have an answer. I just it's complicated. And the big like final demonstration is going to be in Bonn, where the Minister for Agriculture sits today or tomorrow, I believe. So
Hmm.
hopefully, like everything is going to be a little more. Uh, because also I'm not like the articles all say they were very clear about what they want, but I couldn't find it. They were basically against the recent new environmental regulation, but what they want in its stead, whether they want it just like completely struck or whether they want subsidies to like make up the shortfall, I haven't been able to find out yet. But maybe that's
Hmm.
all going to become clear today or tomorrow. But yes, as I said, a
Yeah,
thousand
maybe.
tractors is super impressive.
Yeah, I love those. I love
Hmm.
those types of demonstrations.
Yeah.
They're great.
Okay. Shall we move on to our actual topic of discussion?
Okay.
Let's close that, close that, close that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Moving from our support for
Yep.
demonstrating agriculture to our dislike for
Extreme
far
dislike,
right
thank you.
environmentalism, eco-fascism. Yeah,
it's it's kind of sad that you can't do like blanket statements anymore. Like used to be that I'm pro the worker, but these days it's also complicated. You
yeah.
can't do
Am I?
easy. Yeah, you can't do easy takes anymore. You know.
This is. Hmm.
Okay. Let's
So,
get.
would you like to read the article?
Or would you? You cut out there for a second. Did you want to read it?
Oh,
Oh.
no. I prefer you read it. There's a
Oh.
lot of
Okay.
German in here,
Excellent.
and you know I pronounce the German.
Okay. Of course, there's a lot of German in this. Okay. Why white supremacists are hooked on green living. Ecofascism
Yeah,
is
of
fashion.
course. We're talking about the far right.
Yep. Ecofascism is fashionable again on the far right, thanks to a rise in global temperatures and anti-immigrant nationalism by Sam Adler-Bell from 2019. On Saturdays, Sarah Dye and her husband, Douglas McKay, sell
Hmm.
seasonal vegetables and eggs at farmers markets in Bloomington, Indiana. Sarah stands behind a stall piled high with heirloom tomatoes, basil, okra, and acorn squash. With a tow-headed baby in her arms, I had to Google that. Tow-headed means just blonde. She greets customers and makes small talk. She and Douglas own Schooner Creek Farm, in nearby Nashville, Indiana. They are crunchy, even for Bloomington, a college town with a distinctly earthy vibe. You'd never guess that in private far-right chat rooms, Sarah goes by Folk Mom. She posts about homeschooling, recommends books by neo-Nazis, and complains about the strife faced by whites who live in non-white neighborhoods. She also occasionally writes about farming. Fascists have long shared Volksmom's preoccupation with green living. The past few years have seen a resurgence of eco-fascist and eco-nationalist themes in the rhetoric of Europe's far-right parties and in writings of online radicals. Some, inspired by Netflix's recent thriller about Ted Kaczynski, have embraced the Unabomber's nihilist primitivism. Others have adopted Norse aesthetics and a radically
Hmm.
anti-humanist version of deep ecology. Both the Christchurch and El Paso mass shooters included environmentalist themes in their white nationalist manifestos. I had no idea that they were going for environmental themes as well. Okay. When writing about ecofascists, the media often speaks of green politics masking a darker racial vision. But most eco-fascists are sincere in their environmentalism. The common theme, said Peter Staudenmayer, a professor of history at Marquette University, is this link between a yearning for purity in the environmental sphere and a desire for radicalized purity in the social sphere, racialized purity in the social sphere. Both people like Diane McKay and the nation is for people like Diane McKay, the nation is an ecosystem, and non-white immigrants are an invasive species. The Nazi slogan "Blood and Soil," yeah. And again, like invasive species talk, it just so maps onto like white replacement and all that stuff. It's a fucking gift.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really tight metaphor that they use all the time.
Yeah.
Sort of in the same way that we can talk about communal gardening and
Yeah.
cohabitating plants and planting varieties together as an analogy for what we should do in our community. They can do the same thing for purity and invasive species as an analogy for what we do in our communities. One of the reasons I really like this article is because they do a good job of explaining sort of what these metaphors are, or how the eco-fascist rhetoric is tied in without necessarily equating eco-fascist rhetoric with progressive organic farming.
Okay, the Nazi slogan "Blood and Soil" re-entered the public discourse 2 years ago when torch-wielding neo-Nazis chanted it in Charlottesville. But the phrase actually predates the Third Reich. In the 19th century, German Romantic writers like Ernst Moritz Arndt and Wilhelm Heinrich Riehl synthesized naturalism and nationalism. "We must save the forest," Riehl wrote in 1853. "Not only so that our ovens do not become cold in winter, but also so that the pulse of life, of people continues to beat warm and joyfully, so that Germany remains German."
That's one of those points. So I think if we look at the way progressive rhetoric goes, we must save the forest so that our ovens do not become cold in winter.
Yeah.
And then that second part of his statement about the pulse of life in Germany remaining German.
Yeah.
That part we would not advocate.
Nope.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff just also gives them like this real rhetoric out. Like you can make these. Oh, so you think that environmentalism is not important when you try to like sort of argue against far right propaganda? Oh, so you think that we should just like kill the environment? Is that what you think? Like, no, obviously not. But also.
Exactly. But also, yeah, we need to do something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. This philosophy later inspired the Völkisch movement, a youthful revolt against capitalist modernity that preached a return to the land and to the wholeness, purity, and plenitude of rural peasant life. In the 1920s and 30s, veneration of the earthbound folk and its hatred for its opposites, the rootless urban Jew, found its way into Nazi ideology, where they were infused with scientific racism and transformed into a rallying cry. The concept of blood and soil gives us a moral right to take back as much land in the East as is necessary, wrote Richard Walter Darré, the Third Reich's Minister for Food and Agriculture. He spoke of Jewish people as weeds.
It is.
Yep. And such theories have a long history in American ecological movements as well. In the early 20th century, Madison Grant, the Manhattan lawyer, joined the conservationist efforts of Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir?
I suppose. I thought that was one for you.
No.
Nope, okay.
Who had founded the Sierra Club in 1892. These men shared an affinity for scientific racism. Roosevelt's... I had no idea that the Sierra Club has such a, dark past.
Yeah, well...
I could... Sort of the way...
things
in
America around 1890 probably have some sort of dark past.
I consider Sierra Club sort of a suburban mom kind of a thing. They bring a casserole and talk about the environment kind of a thing.
Yeah, well,
Yep.
You know, there might be a private school that's preaching, Nazi occultism. So,
oh God, yeah.
maybe it is. Maybe it is a suburban soccer mom club.
We should look into whether the Sierra Club and the Steiner schools are
Yeah, are they related?
because
What are these?
okay, these men showed an affinity for scientific racism. Roosevelt praised Grant's 1916 white supremacist tome, The Passing of the Great Race, or The Racial Basis for European History, as a capital book. Another fan, Adolf Hitler, wrote Grant a letter calling his book his personal Bible. That's not a good sign.
Nope.
For these early American conservationists, the frontier was a place infused with, as the environmental historian William Cronon has written, the vigor and independence of America's national character. The sort of grabbing of national character from like these rural places. They did that in that last article we read about British fascist movement in agriculture as well, didn't they? Sort of this picture of the farmer tilling the soil.
And to me, this is sort of you hear all the time that America is sort of a proto-fascist nation, in that Hitler took a lot of inspiration from America in the way we made our sort of nostalgic reactionary movements that also had this like purity, hard work, and dedication, earthiness to them. And that's applied to a lot of far-right movements worldwide. It's something that I don't want to necessarily say originates in America, but the farthest back I can trace it is sort of this turn of the century American like frontiersman aesthetic. Because also at this time, the country's going through a lot of changes. We're modernizing. There's women's suffrage movements that have taken a lot of strength. Slavery was made illegal around this time is when you see a lot of the Jim Crow laws reintegrated. Around the 1880s into the turn of the century is when a lot of that Jim Crow era racism starts up again. And you also get harking back to that frontier era of America that's considered the greatness that we have to return to. So you're talking about the cowboy aesthetic. Or that old agricultural aesthetic, that really gets pushed as American principles and is really the foundation for a lot of the proto-fascist movements that we make later. The specific innovations in Europe were the sort of like class analysis, if you want to call it that was integrated into these movements. So they went from being reactionary, nostalgic, like traditionalist movements to being a sort of radical change from the status quo in an economic way. So yeah, you will see a lot of the same imagery, a lot of the same aesthetic between like early proto-fascist American reactionary movements and like the actual fascist movements that we saw in Europe 20 years later. Would be about the time of the travel of information as well.
I always wondered, do you know how they managed to like so whitewash the cowboy aesthetic? Because historically it was massively black and Mexican, but in the movies of the 1950s it was so white. Is it just that white people had the capital and owned the publishing companies, so they just pushed this myth?
Almost precisely.
Okay.
So all of the media that would have been produced would have been produced for white people by white people. So you wouldn't have gotten the perspective of like any black frontier heroes that might have existed would never have gotten published. So you have the odd story that I could look up later for a black writer who was going under a white pseudonym to get published. That sort of thing would have been necessary. And then when you fast forward into sort of the time of like Western movie theater, and you're talking about like your John Waynes and so on. You're talking about a second era of racism just prior to the civil rights movement.
Oh yeah.
Where, you know, we're still in the midst of segregation at that time. Certainly, blackness wasn't accepted in popular culture at that time. And so you really wouldn't have seen much of that apart from the occasional tokenized side character in a Western movie. So it's really those two movements, the function of early like post-slavery white supremacy, and then later like reactionary during the civil rights movement, that reactionary white supremacy. They pretty much completely and utterly whitewash that whole event, and they change it from being, you know, like the genocidal like terror that the Old West was into this like awesome gunslinging romance that people think of it as. And there are other, you can sort of see evidence of this sort of difference. Just in, and this is something that it's a little bit nerdy, but if you look at the type of weapons that are shown in those movies, the 6-shooter revolver with the quick draw holster and all of that, those things would have existed in the way that they're depicted for maybe 10 or 20 years in actual history. And they present that as though it's like this whole 70, 80-year history of our country. No, it's just a brief period around probably the 1880s. One of the popular guns that you hear about all the time is like the Colt Peacemaker, when the most common gun for like an actual like cowboy rancher would have been like a naval service pistol, kept over from like a Spanish War or Cuban War. And you really wouldn't have seen that except for like around 1880 to 900 or 1900. So,
which makes sense because a 6-shooter isn't actually good for the sort of things that a farmer would need a gun for, like, you know, wild animals and all that stuff. So
no, and they would the pistols that people would have had would have been the pistols that they had when they were in the military. In the military engagements of the time, we're talking about the Spanish-American War, which is like you're talking about Mexico, but a lot of it you're talking about naval fighting. So that's where like the motivation for the weapons would come from. So those are the models we should be looking at. But we see different models in all of the media of the time. Part of that is probably because of like product placement for Colt. They probably paid to have their weapon featured so prominently in a lot of these films. Anyway, that's just sort of one of the other symptoms, along with the whitewashing, that you see from the reactionary movement being in charge of producing the content about the period.
But it is really striking how they go back to the frontier, like in 1880 after the after the end of slavery, and again in the 1950s after the during the civil rights era. It's really striking.
Yeah, the aesthetic, that return to the frontier. Because again, a lot of cowboys in history, they didn't believe that the Civil War had actually ended. They didn't accept the surrender when the Southern states surrendered. A lot of those soldiers didn't accept that surrender, and instead they ran away from the new Union into the free open space where they could do what they want. So, right. So a lot of what the callback when you're talking about this frontier period is you're talking about a callback to a time where people were reacting very heavily against the loss of a civil war over slavery. That was more than people like to admit, and more than you. It's not something that like they never talk about the motivation outside of like there was a gold rush and they found gold out west. But one of the most significant motivations for moving out west was to get away from a country that you felt was oppressing you because you had just been fighting a revolution against this country. So it was to get away from everything and find your own cut of space where you could do what you want. And then they sort of try and brush over the fact that it was a very racist, like a deeply troubled war.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, I only know the gold rush from like old movies, and I've never heard this perspective of like, the loss of war having any. It's just gold from what I heard in media.
Yeah. Well, and another thing, I got a better understanding of. I mean, obviously, I've studied racism and the end of slavery like fairly extensively, but I got a really good perspective of it when I left the Navy. A lot of veterans have this sort of impulse to get away from society.
Okay.
If you watch like the movie Rambo, what does he do when he starts feeling stressed by society? He goes into the woods and starts laying traps. That's very, very dramatic, but it's a movie. But a lot of former military guys lean really heavily on camping or hunting or getting a ranch or going onto a farm. That isolation from society is comforting. So knowing that, seeing then the big rush after the war to move west makes a lot more sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I need to read more history. Apparently, watching movies is not a good way to learn history. Who could have thunk it?
Depends on the movie, but yeah.
True.
Right.
Okay. For these early American conservationists, I always want to say conversationists, conservationists, the frontier was a place infused with I've already read that. That was the next one. American environmentalism has worked hard to exercise the eugenics and colonial conquest from its movements. After years advocating stricter border laws and population control, the Sierra Club, for example, adopted a neutral policy on immigration in the 1990s. In the past decade, liberal Greens have embraced an environmental justice framework, striving in their activism to involve the oppressed people to bear the burdens of capitalist effects on climate, air, and water.
Yeah, and that's sort of, so when we talk about the Sierra Club specifically, obviously it mentions that as we progress as a society, it's been 100 years since it was founded, more than that now, but as we progress as a society, within that organization, they had to present a different platform, at the very least. So they did adopt more progressive platforms as the time goes on. Obviously not great. They adopted a neutral policy on immigration. But it's also evidence, put very well in this article, that the American environmental movement really did make a hard shift away from the proto-fascist trends into progressive trends. Maybe even a harder shift than in some of the European countries, like in England. I don't know that much about the English environmental movement. I'm going to be honest, but I don't know. It definitely seems from the articles that we've read so far that have been mostly based in England or centered on England, that their movement didn't have the same or as dramatic a shift as ours in America had. In America, even the proto-fascist Sierra Club became a relatively progressive organization by the 90s.
I also think because, Europe didn't have, a civil rights movement. So we never had to reckon with that past. So I know farmers and rural clubs and organizations as strictly conservative.
Oh, ours are too. Yeah.
No, okay.
Most of rural America, it's people don't like admitting it, but most of rural America is made up of fairly racist white people in America. That's just sort of how it is.
I lived in Kansas for a year, and it was really striking because I thought the town I lived in was just white people until we took a different exit off the turnpike, and it was like this one part of town was literally just white people to the extent that I thought that no black people lived there, and then we took a different exit, and all of a sudden it's oh, there they all are, and this sort of segregation.
Yeah,
I was
it's
really
really bad
surprised
in
by
rural
that.
America.
Yeah.
It's worse in rural America than it is in southern
Uh-huh.
America. So if you go to like the Kansases or the Dakotas or
Yeah.
Utah, it's incredibly segregated and mostly, almost entirely white. I was in Georgia. Georgia's famous for having been, that's where plantations were. That's where tobacco farming and cotton farming was. And there's similar feelings where, if you're driving for an hour on the highway, you could stop at any point and think that there were no black people in the state.
Yeah.
But if you go to Atlanta, it's 100% black.
Almost. Yeah.
Like 90, I want to say 92% black. And Atlanta is one of the towns where it's like, you would see a white person walking around and be like, oh, I found one. What are you doing here? Are you lost? Do you need help? Yeah. But it's even worse than that in places like Kansas or like Oklahoma's another one.
Yeah.
Oklahoma. Put a pin in that. We'll get back to it at
some
point.
Today, however, ecofascism is once again gaining purchase. Anders Breivik, the Norwegian extremist who murdered 69 young Labour Party members in 2011, referenced Madison Grant in his manifesto. The Christchurch shooter echoed real, linking the preservation of the land to the preservation of cultural ideas and beliefs. Non-whites in the Global South, he wrote, are overproducing and invading Europe and America to despoil the West's natural inheritance. To save the environment, the invaders must be killed. His writings inspired the El Paso shooter who wrote, if we can get rid of enough people, then our way of life can be made more sustainable.
Yeah. And so this is that tilt back into like strict eco-fascism.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that in the environmental movement, eco-fascism is back on the rise. I would say that in response to, as a reaction to the environmental movement, eco-fascism has adjusted its rhetoric.
Yeah.
Or fascism has adjusted its rhetoric.
And also the environmental movement has been really slacking. That they really haven't policed themselves about like rhetoric about antinatalism and all that stuff. I think that they have to just think about what they're saying basically, so they don't give the far right purchase in their thinking.
I don't know that I can blame the environmental movement too much for this, because here's why. I don't think we can really fairly say that the Christchurch shooter or the El Paso shooter had environmentalist motives.
Yeah.
I think that they use this rhetoric
as an excuse.
Okay. I think it's one of the ways that fascist rhetoric always works, where you go from subtle to too strong very gradually.
Yeah.
And so one of the entry points to the far right, you can talk about like atheism as an entry point to the far right. That doesn't necessarily mean that atheists have to explicitly adjust their rhetoric so that they don't seem racist. It's just, this is how racists like to speak.
Yeah.
They'll say religion is bad, but what they meant by religion was Muslims individually, Middle Eastern Muslims specifically.
Yeah.
Similarly here, I don't think that we can blame the environmental movement for fascists picking up their rhetoric.
Yeah.
Especially like the Christchurch shooter is one of the really glaring ones to me, because people made a deliberate effort not to look into anything that he said too carefully. But to sort of, some journalists glanced over it to sort of summarize his views. I think if you look very carefully at what he's saying, you realize that a lot of these buzzwords are very poorly crafted dog whistles. And like, when he's talking about invading non-whites from the global south, he's just spitting back the same great replacement theory that they've been using for decades. But but he's putting the environmentalist tilt on it because of the Green New Deal movement and all of the environmental progress movements that have been getting so much media attention. He wants to sort of piggyback on that. So I think even in this article, which has been pretty interesting and pretty good to me so far, even here they sort of overstate how much the environmental aspects are important to the fascist aspects. I think a lot of this is just sort of the skin or the animation on top of the existing structure of their ideas and beliefs.
So they just like the vocabulary and take it over.
Yeah, they like the aesthetic. They like the aesthetic because environmentalism is a popular aesthetic.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you go on YouTube, a lot of vegan YouTube is very, very far right.
Yeah.
So it's like that doesn't invalidate veganism, and I don't think you can blame the vegans for not being more exclusive of the far right. I think vegans need to just do their thing, and we have to learn how to spot far right rhetoric.
Yeah.
In and amongst things that we like.
I feel like, especially with the YouTube vegans, to like engage more critically with them, to like, not just thinking like, oh, they're vegans as well, so we can't be too confrontational. That I think needs to stop.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not a vegan myself, but I think that is something that I see in vegan communities a lot, is this tendency to defend one another.
Yeah.
Like vehemently. And it's like, not all vegans are good people because they are vegan.
Yeah.
And not all good people are vegan. And not all people who are not vegans are bad people.
Yeah.
We have to learn to put aside the single plank of a person's identity and judge sort of what they're saying and what they're doing with their speech a little bit more deliberately. Yeah. I didn't mean to go at vegans there. That was
No. I don't think we have. Veganism, great. Far right veganism is not. And it's okay to say that, even if they're vegans. Okay. Contemporary ecofascists see the border as a dividing line between those who deserve protection and those who deserve nothing. Christian Parenti, the author of Tropic of Chaos, Climate Change and the New Geography of Violence, calls this the politics of the armed lifeboat. In a 1974 essay on lifeboat ethics, the ecologist Garrett Hardin argued that the lucky few aboard the lifeboat, a wealthy country in the world with dwindling resources, will only survive if the many drowning in the water are denied entry. Pentti Linkola, a Finnish deep ecologist whose theories are increasingly popular with contemporary ecofascists, puts his point starkly. When the lifeboat is full, those who hate life will try to load it with more people and sink the lot. Those who love and respect life will take the ship's axe and sever the extra hands that cling to the sides.
What's interesting about this sort of lifeboat theory is it was also mentioned by one of the writers that made me as anarchist as I am, Noam Chomsky. He talked about ecofascism briefly as a part of a larger sort of conversation. He was asked a question about ecofascist movements. And he sort of mentioned this sort of lifeboat thinking, which is that as the environment continues to collapse, then people will naturally sort of cluster into whichever affinity group they can to perpetuate their way of life. And I think he said somewhere in there, and I don't disagree, and I agree, which, like, okay, man, you don't have to... Yeah, what's that, like, Hitler meme? Like, to correct a previous statement, no, you don't have to hand it to Hitler. You don't actually have to say that you agree. You can just say that, yes, the environment collapses and there will become eco-fascist rhetoric as a response to environmental collapse. And that's sort of what's what they're pointing to here.
Yeah.
Ecofascism sort of, I don't want to say cropped up, because as we've read, there were ecological tenets to a lot of fascist movements. But it was a talking point in the 70s that I believe Chomsky had written about, which is where that question came from.
Yeah.
It's just, it shouldn't be unexpected, is what I'm saying. We've known that this was coming for 45 years.
Yeah. US government has already predicted this outcome. In a 2003 study on the likely geopolitical effects of abrupt climate change of an abrupt climate change scenario, Pentagon researchers wrote that wealthy nations will respond by constructing virtual fortresses around their countries, preserving resources for themselves, and hardening their borders to hold back unwanted starving immigrants, which is literally like what Europe is doing right now. Like they're talking about, the fortress Europe and all that.
Well, no, and we're building a wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, same basic concept. It makes me uncomfortable, because if we're talking about the lifeboat scenario, I would say that being in a wealthy country is not necessarily like being in a lifeboat. Because I don't think that we live in a world where, even America, I don't think we would feed ourselves alone.
Yeah.
We import so much produce. I'm eating grapes right now that are likely Mexican.
Yeah.
They say they're Californian, but I'm not sure. They were very cheap. So to me, it's more like we're a big crowd of people who are just adrift at sea.
Yeah.
And we're starting to sink.
I think we're literally the Titanic, where the first class had a lot of lifeboats.
I don't even think we're the Titanic. I think we're already in the water. And I think the ecological collapse isn't the ship sinking. I think it's the storm brewing.
Okay.
And again, this is something that I learned in the Navy. One of the easiest ways to stay alive is with many people helping each other to stay afloat. So, you do things like you fill your pants with air to make a flotation device out of them. These things work best in conjunction with one another, and they help exponentially.
Okay.
So, for us, whereas in a lifeboat, we would cut off the hands of the Panamanians who are trying to come to America, what we don't acknowledge is that we import all of our bananas from Panama.
Yeah.
So we actually, if we wanted to survive better, we would make it so that that agricultural environment would be more sustainable. And we would work to limit the impact of climate change in the global south. Because, and this is a purely capitalist, like this is a liberal framework on it. It's not even my radicalism that brings this up, because we import our food from there.
Yeah.
So why would we want to cut off our own agricultural imports and sacrifice those? It's a purely fascistic sort of way of approaching these type of situations.
Yeah.
I just think there are also very valid, like, internationalist rather than isolationist methods for handling it. But I do like that the article at least acknowledges that ecofascism is a type of lifeboat ethics.
Yeah.
And that's something that specifically I can tell you, okay, this is why this whole movement is, because the ethic behind it, the principles behind it are flawed.
I completely lost my way. Oh, there. While mainstream conservatives deny that massive climate dislocation is imminent, and liberals hold out hope for tech managerial solutions, ecofascists and nationalists are at least being realistic about the future. You gotta hand it to them. These.
They are not wrong.
These groups perversely lay the blame for climate catastrophe at the feet of the global poor. But liberal environmentalists often make a similar mistake. They blame humankind for the impending disaster. In reality, multi-billion-dollar extractive industries and the carbon-spewing corporations of the global north, bear far more to blame than most individuals. The only realistic and moral answer to global green is a global Green New Deal. Hand-wringing about the sins of humanity will never solve a climate crisis created by capitalism. Only an uprising in the global working class can bring the world closer to a solution.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. I like the way you ended the article.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't disagree.
Nope.
I don't believe in banning straws. Nothing.
Nope.
British Petroleum is still a company.
Mm-hmm.
You can ban your straws. They're going to dump 100 million gallons of oil directly into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've kind of I know that banning straws isn't doing anything and it's just, just doing something in order to do something, but I also kind of sympathize because at least you're doing something. Because with, you know, multi-billion dollar extractive industries, which is so international that even voting isn't actually going to do anything. If I vote for the most far left government in Germany possible that are really anti-capitalist, those multi-billion dollar extractive industries are still going to be around.
Yeah.
So it actually needs a global movement of a scale that has never existed before, and I wouldn't know how it could exist. Just
and this is where
there's a
the
kind of hopelessness there.
sort of takes over.
Mm-hmm.
And I get depressed because the incrementalist in me had a lot of faith in Obama when he was doing his environmental programs. Because honestly, I believe that that's the only type of model that could have ever worked.
Yeah.
We're starting to approach the time where it's too late for even that model to work, and then it's eco-fascism, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
There is a tipping point. There is a deadline. But to me, I think doing things like putting very harsh restrictions or environmental regulations in place that target the multi-billion-dollar extractive industries rather than the small farmers who then have to protest them.
Yeah.
That is, to me, is the key. It's finding a way to incentivize with tax reliefs, investment in renewable energy, and in small scale or more sustainable farming.
Yeah.
That's essential rather than banning straws or cutting down on plastic bags at the grocery store. Yes, those things are they're harmful, but the damage is being done by extractive industry.
Yeah.
I think trade deals. The reason I ask so much about the EU is because I'm a really big fan of international trade deals that can then incentivize environmental policy.
Yeah.
So if we had a trade deal with Venezuela to reinvigorate, or Colombia, because we talked about their agricultural industry being shifted so far towards flowers.
Yeah.
If we had a more reciprocal trade deal in place that then enabled them to invest in environmental programs or agricultural programs instead of just in flowers that they're sending to us, I think that does a lot more for the world moving forward than would, even electric vehicles. I don't think does as much as helping nations in Africa gain solar power.
Yeah.
I think that just is much more of a positive impact for the environment. And that type of thing can only be done because we live in a society. In our society, that type of thing can only be done through manipulating and leveraging multi-billion-dollar extractive industry, which sucks.
Yeah.
But like you said, the scale of the global revolution necessary to do it any other way is just, it's laughable. Like, there's no chance.
Yeah.
Like, it's eventually, yes, I agree, 20, 30, 50 years down the line.
Super. Yeah.
I mean, and I'm working in that direction, and I'm trying to get as many people as radical as I can.
Yeah.
But also, in 15 years, like, we're going to lose coral reefs all over Australia, and there's nothing we can do about that now. So I feel like whatever changes we can make today, let's make those and then plan for the future.
Yeah.
In addition to that.
And I mean, in the sense of, small changes, I mean, like Obama, I agree, was not what people hoped he would be, but he managed to change the conversation in healthcare from, healthcare being just, well, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, to healthcare is a right in just less than 10 years, which I think is amazing. And that's a huge revolution. If we can like do something similar in energy or in how farming is done or how food is distributed, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah. And we did the same thing with Obama on emissions. That was one of the reasons he got his Peace Prize, was for the work he did with the Paris Accord.
Yeah.
And like, that was like actually a really positive step internationally. I know it's incrementalist and it wasn't ever going to fix the problem, but like, that is a change in the conversation that didn't exist before he was in office.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give him credit for it, because it was activists who actually pushed that platform and incentivized him doing that, because we presented to him this option. If I want to get reelected, I can adopt an environmental platform and I'll attract this block of active voters.
Okay.
To me, that's like, I don't believe in the democratic system like indefinitely. I don't think this is the best way to organize society.
Okay.
But while we're in this system, it is possible as activists to leverage our movements to make changes within this system.
Yeah.
So I think we see the same thing. Like you said, if you were to vote for the farthest left party, chances are the farthest right parties would say, in order to appeal to these farther left voters, we have to adopt farther left platforms.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to college for political science. That's the nature of the political party. These aren't actually principled organizations.
No.
All they are groups of people looking to present you and sell you whatever they need to get you to vote for them. So if we're incentivizing them to do what we need them to do by voting in a block as activists, along with all of our other programs, all of our direct action, of course. But that is an option moving forward, and it's more change than we could do by excluding this mechanism.
Yeah.
Because the chances of us like rising up and destroying British Petroleum or any of these other like multi-billion-dollar extractive industries, we're not going to close Ford Motors tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. So we need to make whatever change we can. I've gotten a lot of stick in the past, particularly on Twitter, for being such an advocate, like, voter. And I'm really big on voting.
Yeah.
And I constantly yell at people to vote, and not just to vote for the best option that has a chance of winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And try and actually make something change. Like, don't vote for the Green Party, even if the Green Party's platform or their candidate is a little bit better.
Yeah.
Vote for the Democratic Party because it's the farthest left party that has a chance of winning. And that little bit of change is enough, if you're voting in a big enough block, for them to then market to that block.
Yeah.
As opposed to right now, we get such vocal and ardent support for just moderately left, like social democratic candidates, that they abstain from voting in general elections at all. If you're not voting for the parties, then they're going to market to the voters.
Yeah.
And the voters are all reactionary conservative Trump guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know. I've gotten a lot of stick for that sort of argument, but, like, we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. And also, like, does not voting actually help anything? Like, that's, yeah.
No, but of course, if you vote, you're corrupting the revolutionary movement.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So, obviously, you can't do that.
Mm.
And, just speaking in pure, like, socialist theory, there have been good arguments made that electoralism is sort of like a delay in the movement. Those sort of arguments are the accelerationist arguments, which is that, like, by not voting and by not improving anything in a liberal society, we don't give the liberal society any excuses that it can use to perpetuate itself. There's no, well, at least we got you guys a slightly higher minimum wage that it can use. Things just get so bad so fast that, like, revolution becomes the only option. Yeah, they sort of just treat as externalities the fact that when that happens, a whole bunch of people lose their rights and their healthcare and die.
Yeah.
So, like, I still care about those people.
And I always found, like, accelerationists, like, I might agree with every single one of their of what they say. Me personally, I think I could never be accelerationist because I know there's just going to be so many people who are going to be victimized and die before I even notice it's happening,
Yeah. One that gets me a lot, mostly because of the people that I follow and who follow me on Twitter, the trans community. There's a huge transgender, like, block in leftist organizing, especially in anarchist spaces, and and you get activists who will very stringently dissuade people from voting, and then you look a couple of months down the line and you have things like Donald Trump banning trans people from the military, and they're losing their ability to get married, if not their right. And you're like,
and they might lose healthcare.
Yeah, and you're definitely not going to make they needed progress in healthcare anyway.
Yeah.
You're definitely going in the wrong direction. Yeah, it's just it's difficult if you're not participating in government for your voice to be heard in government.
Yeah.
And while we have a government, we need our voices to be heard in government. Yeah. But also, the article is right. In reality,
yes,
the root of the problem is multi-billion-dollar extractive industry, and that needs to be addressed at some point.
Yeah.
And it needs to be addressed directly. An uprising of the global working class. I don't know where that rhetoric is headed. I don't know what's being implied by uprising.
Yeah.
If he's talking about, like, grab your pitchforks, let's go.
Also,
no.
Go where?
Yeah, no. I'm looking at Chile, and I'm like, listen, listen. We need to do some groundwork. We need to lay some foundation before we start that uprising, because they're going to kill you. So,
and
like,
especially
maybe,
in Chile, there doesn't seem to be, like, one movement. It seems to be, like, sort of factions, like, the teachers movement and the students, and sort of factions without one voice. So basically, it's the military is still the loudest voice in that conflict.
Yeah, and what I like about the Chilean movement is that it's so diverse and it's all these different issues that you can see that class solidarity building. And it's the working people. It's all of them. It doesn't matter which aspect of life that they work in. All of them are speaking out. So I really do enjoy that about their movement. I feel so bad because I saw a video not even a half an hour ago that was like, Chilean soldiers like snorting cocaine
I
together
saw that. Oh my God,
before
yeah.
they go out
Yeah.
to like shoot at their
Yeah.
protesters, and I'm like, man,
To bash in the head of some 15-year-old. Yeah.
yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's brutal. Um, it's interesting. That one's a little bit harder for us to follow. Hong Kong's been very easy to follow. They've
Yeah.
had a great social media presence.
Mm-hmm.
But these movements are always interesting to me because I like to see sort of the evolution of the tactics and the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm an ardent believer that a government can't win a war against its own people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also I need to see how that war is fought and what tactics are being deployed on the battlefield so that we can make our responses to them.
Yeah.
So Hong Kong, for example, we got a lot of great ideas, things that people had done before, but like not on the same scale. The use of umbrellas to make, umbrella blocks to stop cameras from doing facial recognition, the use of lasers, the coordinated disposal of like tear gas canisters, all of those things. You're like, these are tactics that we need to be teaching and demonstrating for our own movements. So I'm interested to see what Chileans are doing in response to, like, literally, this is the most militarized, like, reaction from a government that's going at the moment.
Yeah.
I want to be fair. There has been a lot of police brutality in Hong Kong, but not to the same extent. They're like trying to run protesters over with vans.
Yeah.
In Chile. There's also a very huge movement in Beirut that's growing right now. That one looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to see what sort of developments are there. It's interesting to me because, hypothetically, if I had ever been involved in sort of similar actions in America, the sort of things that I'd have seen in response to like tear gas being thrown would be people just sort of grabbing the canisters and throwing them back.
There was that picture of the Black Lives Matter activist, wasn't it? The one guy with the
Edward Crawford.
Yeah.
One of my favorite. It's one of my favorite pictures.
It's an amazing picture. Yeah.
Partially because of the American flag, sort of thing he had going on. It's in the
iconic.
Dreadlocks.
Yeah.
It's just a great picture.
Yeah.
Other things that we see, like the arrests, are not as strong in the American things that I might have hypothetically have gone to if I were going to those sorts of events. In Hong Kong, you might get a video of like a kid flying drop kicking a cop to try and get his friend away, and in America, I don't know that I've ever seen it once, maybe once or twice. I've seen an American protester like rescue an arrested comrade from police, but that's not as common. So we have a lot to learn in the way we do our protesting and our demonstrating from these protests that are dealing with much more harsh reactions from the government. Because for us to get any significant change done through direct action rather than through voting, we're going to have to inspire those same reactions from our government. So we need to know what's coming and how to react to that. Like, it's not a global working class uprising is not going to be pretty in America.
No.
Like, our police are just as militarized, if not more. And it's only the fact that our movements are so liberal and so lacking in radical content that we don't see the same reaction from them.
Yeah.
And any time our protests start to approach that radical threshold, we start to see the militarized response, like you do with Black Lives Matter in the 2014 and 2015 era, when I was like much more deeply involved with the movement. You're talking like trucks full of riot cops and like the full marching down the street riot cops. And like when those things come out, they're our response really isn't well developed as yet. Another thing I'm not a fan of is the nonviolent movement. I definitely fall on the side of the Malcolm X on that one. I feel like nothing's ever going to change if they're not afraid of you.
Yeah.
Like, why would they? Like, yes, you can beat me and arrest me.
Yep.
Okay, and so they will. And then they have.
And then you're in prison for the next 30 years, and the result.
It was a great symbology. It's sort of like the Extinction Rebellion movement. It's not obviously the Civil Rights movement, not the same.
No.
But the idea that getting arrested in and of itself is sort of a political statement is just so laughable to me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, we've cost the government $89 million so far of these protests getting arrested. Okay, well, how much were the fines that you guys had to pay? So, like, have they profited? They profit off of your demonstration? Well, then it's not an effective demonstration.
Nope.
Try breaking a window. They have to pay for those. It hits them in the pocket, as it were.
Yeah.
We sort of strayed away from the subject matter.
No, but yeah, you know, the question of, you know, a global working class uprising is, you know, how do you do that? So basically any sort of uprising kind of feeds into that. Also, I'm kind of, because, you know, at the moment there's a lot of different demonstrations in a lot of parts of the world, and it's like really exciting, and sort of that there seems to be this real spark of something might be changing here. But then I think we were here with the Arab Spring, and that came to not very much. And so I'm kind of like, I ping back and forth between, oh, this is really exciting, and we've been there before. But it is very exciting, but
it is exciting. And, you know, I think that's another case where we need to learn from our history. And, you know, part of the xenophobia of America, we heard about the Arab Spring, but nobody was studying it or talking about it in an excited way. No, I shouldn't say nobody. Some people were.
Yeah.
Few people were, though. And so I don't really know what happened to stop that movement. Looking at the scale of it when it started, you would imagine that has some serious momentum behind it. And so, like, logically, from studying history, I know that the only way that momentum stops is if it is stopped. Like, that's how inertia works.
Yeah.
And so that it didn't build tells me it was suppressed.
Yeah.
And that it was suppressed means there was a tactic of suppression. And we need to learn how to respond to that. But I have no idea what tactics were used, because we treat that all as though we're like, that was just the uncivilized Middle East and the dictators took back over.
Yeah.
It's like, it's never that easy. Yeah. The Arab Spring was exciting. Occupy, the Occupy movement was one of those back in like 2010. I remember that movement because I was fresh-faced in college. And like, I remember that movie very, very clearly.
Yeah.
And I remember that movement starting to fall apart because it didn't have at its core a single, like, unified message. It was discontent, but it is where, like, the top 1%, where that came from.
Yeah.
We are the 99%, sort of that rhetoric started back there. So it did leave a legacy.
Yeah.
But I don't know what tactics of suppression were used. I mean, obviously, you have, like, the tear gas and the kicking people out of the park and, like, stopping them from actually doing the Occupy part of Occupy.
Yeah.
But, like, the social movement that was inspired by that also slowed down significantly. And sort of to go back to that accelerationism that we were talking about, the accelerationist critique would be, well, because we had a liberal in office and they made a couple of incremental changes, people got less enthusiastic for the movement. and they just sort of brush over the fact that the movement didn't start until after the Liberal was in office. So I don't really know what happened
there. Yeah. And my personal theory is that a lot of these movements just stop because, people have to eat, Eventually, after sort of a month, 6 weeks, your money runs out and you kind of, your kids are hungry and then you just...
And you have to go to work,
Yeah.
Which is, if we bring this back to like why we have this podcast, it's because I believe that gardening is one of the ways that we can help sustain these movements for longer and longer periods.
Yeah.
Because people have to eat, and like if we're growing the food, then we don't have to go to work to get the food. Obviously, we have to like find a way to house people as well.
Yeah.
So that you not only do you not have to eat, you don't have to pay your rent. And if you don't have to go to work for food and you don't have to go to work for rent, the more of these sort of necessities that we provide for ourselves within our communities, the more time we have for general strikes and for protests.
Yes.
But also, an aspect of that is our ability to grow that infrastructure and build those movements only exists insofar as we can get support from the system now in order to build those.
Yeah.
Gardens aren't free. I have like a GoFundMe that I'm trying to run, not really all that actively, but the idea being I can't afford to build the garden that I want to build to provide the edibles that I want to provide for the community without a certain amount of money that I'm probably not going to make with just my wages, unless that minimum wage were like $5 higher than it is.
Yeah.
Which is why I vote for a higher minimum wage. If I had more money, I could organize with my money better. And I know that there are other people who are trying to do the same thing. If we all had guaranteed health care, then we can go on strike from work without risk of losing our doctor. That's like a very real concern, I know, for a lot of... I spent some time working in an automotive factory, and a lot of automotive workers don't want to go on strike because they don't want to risk their benefits expiring or their benefits being taken away or something along those lines. And it's like, what if we had Medicare for all?
Yeah.
Well, that would have meant, voting for Bernie Sanders. He's a crazy lefty.
Yeah.
A lot of guys that I worked with voted for Trump. And it's like, how are you going to complain on the one hand about not being able to strike because you're too reliant on your employer, and then turn around and vote for the person who really wants you to rely on your employer for literally everything all the time? But, that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Not really. It's the same discussion. But it is evidence, like, there's a radical leftist critique for organic farming, for localized agriculture, for community self-reliance, and for mutual aid that exists outside of the eco-fascist critique. And it's important that you learn the eco-fascist rhetoric so that you can spot the difference between these groups, because you'll notice nothing that I've said has been about the preservation of cultural ideals and beliefs. It hasn't been about purity, or it hasn't been about lifeboat ethics in any way. It's really, in order to feed the starving immigrants, we need to be producing food that doesn't cost so much money. If immigrants were able to come to the country and get health care and get food and get housing, then they wouldn't work for such suppressed wages that it puts other families at risk. And if other families weren't at risk of starvation or eviction, then these protests against immigrants coming to the country wouldn't have to exist. We could all coexist if we were all helping each other meet each other's needs, as opposed to holding back unwanted starving immigrants. That's the exact opposite of what we need to do. I don't know. That's why I liked this article.
Yeah.
made me think of all of these things.
Mm-hmm. And I spun off a bunch of different directions from this article, like into deep ecology and, Ted Kaczynski and...
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They managed to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But do it in a way that, like, remain coherent
to
the point.
Yeah. And to see a sort of development of these ideas and movements. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You get a nice direct development of like what is actually happening. Mm-hmm. So I looked up the Sierra Club.
Oh.
Yeah. They have like a website that I've been scrolling up and down a little bit. Yeah, it definitely seems like a pretty liberal, like fairly progressive organization now. Yeah, it's like
they turned it around. Nice.
Fight back now. Help protect Earth's precious natural resources from Trump. Which, like,
wow.
Okay, calm down.
Yeah.
Calm down. Like, but you know.
Mm-hmm. Trump's a nice totem, but he's not actually the problem.
Yeah. I don't know how much, like, I won't back down fighting for my state's public lands. You know, like, I'm not sure about that one, actually. But, like, is that healthy?
Access to the commons? Sure.
Yes, true. But also, like, I already knew this place was magical.
Yeah.
Like, how into your state's public lands are you? Are you protecting them from the foreign invaders?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking, protect public lands from, like, being made private and drilled for oil, but...
Yeah, and it's also tough because America is, like, a colonial invasive nation.
Yeah.
So, like, the writer of the article seems to be native. And so, like, protecting the native land from, like, the colonists, I actually have to support that.
Yeah.
I'm actually pro. Does that mean I'm pro eco-fascism as long as it's Native American eco-fascism? Ooh.
There's like layers here, Jesus.
Oh man, but also maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited. Next week, then, or next episode, I suppose.
Yeah.
We'll be going over German bio-Nazis.
Yes, and a German vegan butchers.
Oh, nice. Exciting.
Yeah. We've danced around with like the British and the US. Let's just go to the source.
Yeah, well, one of the I would argue that I'm in the source. Then again, I think the source might be like Rome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just blame the Italians.
I wonder how old, like if we tracked these nationalist proto-fascist movements, I wonder how old we could go.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, the fashion, the fascia are actually from Rome, I think. Like the fascia that fascism was.
Yeah.
If I had any idea how to spell that. Oh no.
Yeah,
that's not that. No.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and also like from that article, I went off to like looking at like wild roots and like oh God, what's it called? Oh, like all the like living in the wild and all those like the knowledge of how to like forage and hunt, and oh god, I love it. And it's like so much of that is far right, and I don't know why.
Yeah, bushcraft is.
Bushcraft. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been watching a lot of bushcraft on YouTube, or at least I was for a while.
Yeah.
I sort of got put off a little bit by a couple of the guys that I was watching turning out to have some very problematic views.
Oh.
Yeah, and I caught them. And, I see these things a lot more clearly than most people do, probably. But yeah. I caught them, and it just, now I don't watch any of it anymore. But yeah, it is great, and I know a lot of people who are like, they're very into trying to reconnect with nature, not as an effort to become more pure and clean and white, but as an effort to become more a part of the environment.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the disconnects that's causing a lot of this problem. Is we've created this society that so alienates us from our environment that we forget the impact that we have on it. We should be working to become more one with nature.
Yeah. Without turning into Ted Kaczynski.
Without turning into Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, because like
it's a fine line.
Yeah. No, but seriously, like I read Ted Kaczynski's what's it called, Technological Slavery. And I found myself sort of nodding along, and then I was thinking, "Oh my God, what?"
Yeah. Oof. So the next episode, I'm feeling kind of sick.
Next episode, we're going to be ordering some fertilizer online.
Oh no. Not that. Oh no. There goes the Twitch channel.
Oh, damn it. Can we say disavow in a video game, or?
Yeah. Next episode, we're going to be learning about compost, actually. We're going the other way. Let's... Cool. So do we have any other interesting talking points to brush on before we leave?
I've got nothing.
Let me...
Oh, I looked up at the Foundation for Deep Ecology, and they give grants, and as of 2012, these funds totaled more than 52 million. Overall philanthropy exceeds 73 million when costs related to Foundation's public and program grant association and FTE books, including blah, 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 blah. This organization that I've never heard of gives 73 million in grants.
Yeah, that sounds like every organization that's ever given a grant that I've ever heard of.
Jesus.
Who are you? Where'd you get this money?
Yeah. And also because, like, the only thing they said about deep ecology in this article was, like, this Finnish neo-Nazi? Where was it? That's not a Finn. Oh, here. Pentti-Linkola, the Finnish deep ecologist whose theories are increasingly popular with contemporary eco-fascists, put his point starkly. When the lifeboat is... Oh, yeah, that was the lifeboat thing. When the lifeboat is full, those who hate life will try to load it with more people and sink the lot. Those who love and respect life will take the ship's axe and sever the extra hands that cling to the sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that is backed by, like, serious money. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's about right. Serious money backing eco-fascists. Who would have thought?
Good to know.
Yeah, so we also, I guess we're due. We mentioned having a quick update on the Bulgaria.
Oh yes,
England
yes.
Yeah, so it looks like they made 6 arrests, and they were searching for 3 more. They identified 15 total.
Wow.
In Bulgaria that were arrested for racist abuses. Like I said before, I was watching the game, and what was really great is whichever broadcaster I was watching was they were very good about getting camera shots of the crowd.
Oh, wow.
It was much more than 15 people. There were at least a couple hundred. But it is encouraging that there's some action being taken, and that some of what was done is at least in some way punishable.
Yeah.
Arrestable, forable. That's something that, like, I'm not so sure in America, if a bunch of people were making Nazi salutes in a stadium, if anything can be done outside of, like, a general stadium ban. This is a little bit exciting in that context.
And I think they were arrested for public nuisance, right? If I remember correctly.
Oh, there's another update from 2 days ago. Yeah, the number of arrests is up to 12 now.
Oh. God, where's the noise coming from? Sorry about that. Okay, sorry.
Yep, let's try to do that.
Sorry, what was the update from 2 days ago?
There are now 12 people
wow.
who have been arrested. Yeah.
Oh, here's this from the Independent from 5 days ago. 6 supporters were arrested on Wednesday, with 4 already having been banned from attending sporting events for the next 2 years and fined £440.
Hey. It's pretty good.
Yeah. The referee initiated the first step of UEFA's anti-racism protocol just before the half-hour mark. I did not know UEFA had one of those.
The anti-racist protocols?
I mean,
yeah,
sure.
That's the 3-strike program.
Oh, so, that was it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, strike number 1, the referee's heard it. There's a brief pause in play. He asked for it to stop. Strike number 2, they suspend the game temporarily. They go into the locker room and make announcements over the loudspeakers for it to stop. And then strike number 3, they actually finish the game. They end the game.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation about what that meant, like who wins in that situation. And I haven't been able to find a clear answer on that. I didn't look that hard. I looked
But also, like, football rules are so complicated. Like, getting an actual clear answer is sometimes really weirdly difficult.
UEFA 3-strike rule. Let me see. Was enforced. 3-strike protocol. And the 3rd strike.
Someone said in chat, imagine caring this much about something you have no control over.
Well, I don't think we have no control over it, actually. I think we have plenty of control. It's just difficult to apply.
Yeah. I mean, UEFA is a money-making... no? How do you change corruption? How do you change anything that's wrong? Jesus. Let's just not do anything about anything. Ever.
Yeah, I mean... I don't even know which corruption you're referring to.
I think it's football, yeah.
I mean, football corruption, yeah. But is Bulgaria the nation that's paying all of the bribes here?
No.
There's no changing billionaire minds. That's true, but you can guillotine them.
You can make billionaires not billionaires.
Yeah. Politics, yeah. Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
No, it is difficult to, like, use politics to leverage regulation on big business, but it is possible. That's not outside. That's not beyond the pale of feasibility. And, like, also, if that doesn't work, you can kill them.
And you said my fertilizer joke was too extreme. Come on.
Listen, everybody knows that I'm actually just talking about voting.
Exactly.
But also, guillotines do exist. The French did it.
Yep. Oh God, do you remember when? Oh God, was it Elon Musk who like said like how are people gonna figure out how to build a guillotine when all the engineers work for him or something? It's like, dude, we're gonna figure out how to like drop a fuck of piece of metal on your head. I think that's manageable.
Really, that's not helping your case, dude.
Yep.
We could just hit you with a rock.
Yeah.
Like, it'll just hurt more and take longer. No, but like, seriously, in actuality, you don't have to do anything as drastic as a global violent revolution. Like, you just, you vote for regulation. You vote for changes in tax policy. You use the legislative program.
Yep.
What's wrong with Musk? Ooh, buddy, you might be in the wrong channel. Where do we start? How about his family's like corrupt apartheid emerald mine that he made all of his money off of? We could start there, and then we'll filter down from there. Yeah, but like, you don't have to change a billionaire's mind to make any of that happen. You just have to leverage some of the other structures of society.
Yeah.
To put them in a position where it becomes more profitable to do what you want them to do than what they're currently doing.
Yeah.
And that's possible. You have a mindset. There's nothing we can do to change shit like that. Well, I mean, you're just wrong.
Yeah.
It's all right, though. So why not just enjoy life in your small friend circle and stay in your little bubble world? Because your little bubble world is going to light on fire in 15 years.
Also, that's just not an option for a massive fraction of the population.
You're going to run out of food, dog. Like, all you can do is vote. Sure. I mean, have you considered gardening?
Exactly.
You can garden as well if you want to like grow some food.
You can make food for your small friend bubble.
Yeah, make some food within your small friend bubble. Everybody can take their own couple of things that they grow, and then you can add like making, fresh locally grown dinners together to your. Well, I mean, you can buy food, but if you're buying food, then you're feeding into that dynamic that we're talking about changing.
Also, then you're not in your bubble anymore. Like, if you want to be in your bubble, you're going to have to grow your own food.
That food came from outside of the bubble.
The bubble is compromised.
Like, if you grow like some green onions even, that's a good starting point. And then you're going to run out of food.
Yeah.
So, like,
and then the seawater rises, and then your bubble is floating away.
You mean, no, I know what you mean by bubble. Like, I get bubble. It's not a very complicated, like, socioeconomic critique. Yeah, but, like, you can cut shopping out of that one, is what we're saying. Like, you can just you can cut shopping out of that one, and then like you can work in your community, make friends with your community, live within your community, and
Expand
your
your bubble.
community becomes self-reliant.
Mm-hmm.
And a self-reliant community then has leverage over the billionaires.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty wrong with grocery stores. All of that food is factory farmed and extracted from the global south. Those bananas didn't come from Florida. They came from Panama. And the process of getting those bananas from Panama is sending people back north. Like, so maybe instead of buying all of your food from grocery stores, grow some of it. You can grow your food to stop that. If you're feeding yourself. Yeah. Well, if you don't care, then you don't care. And like I said, you're in the wrong spot. Yeah. It's not like saying going vegan.
No.
It's not like saying going vegan. The community self-reliance is different than trying to end consumption of animal meats. Like, community self-reliance is just, that's just smart locally. That is its own action. Yeah.
And when you're vegan, you're still participating in the system. You're just buying different stuff.
Yeah.
When you're growing your food,
still comes from a factory farm.
Yeah.
Not all vegan food, but most vegan food still comes from factory farms. It's still highly processed.
Yeah.
So like, that's not necessarily any more leverage on the system than like, you know what I mean? Like, veganism isn't necessarily radical. Radical is like community self-reliance and direct mutual aid. No, yeah, exactly. I just said the opposite of what you've been saying. No, veganism veganism exists within the system. Radical gardening and becoming a self-reliant community doesn't exist within the system. That's something you can do, unless you're 14. In which case, you're dependent on your parents for that. Maybe you could try and convince them, like, hey, can we have a garden? I mean, you don't have to live in a forest. In fact, living in a forest would be detrimental to growing your own food. I don't think you do. I think if you realize that living a 9-to-5 job life within your friend circle is what's making you so depressed that you've given up and just give money to the grocery stores.
Yeah.
Maybe if you worked on growing your own food, you'd be inspired. Yeah, dude.
12-hour days.
Alienated.
Jesus.
Alienated.
Yeah.
You're protracted from your lifestyle. You get your food at a grocery store. You have a small friend circle. If you work 7 to 7, then why are you on Twitch right now? Are you watching Twitch at work?
Jesus.
Oh, I don't know, that maths.
Like, I mean, you shouldn't have to work 12-hour days and, just see your friends on the weekend. That's massively diminishing your life. Spending that much on...
That's called capitalist alienation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what that is. Yeah, you're protracted from your life. So, work less, garden more, spend more time with your community.
Yes. Grow your community.
Work 24 hours, and then get 48 hours off. It's a lot of time for spending within your community.
Yeah.
Just, if you're growing food, You're hosting potlucks. You're meeting people.
Make some
You're
connections.
expanding your community behind your friend bubble. Right?
Yeah.
And then simultaneously, you're not giving money to the billionaire corporations whose mind you want to change. Like, I don't know. It just seems like all of these pillars work together pretty well into sort of an ideological platform.
Yeah.
It's viable.
And you can just start small, start where you are. And if it
Use
goes
what
well,
you
you
have.
grow it. Yeah.
Arthur Ashe. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can.
Exactly.
For example, growing chives on your windowsill.
Yes.
And at least you don't have to pay for your chives.
You
know, it's one step. And then next thing you know, you're growing bird's eye chilies and canning it. I don't think that's how that works.
I don't think that there's a connection there, and I've found the opposite with my life.
Yeah, usually people who get away from the system feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's this whole movement towards homesteading. Is the idea that you make like fully sustainable off-grid livings.
Yeah.
Like those exist. They're not just doomsday preppers. It's like a real, like a valid way to live life.
Yeah.
Just grow your food, solar power, friends around you, family around you, get a puppy. That's going to be some good living right there.
Yeah.
Versus like, 1 a.m. on Twitch, arguing. Elon Musk solar panels are actually a lot less efficient than you think.
They're terrible and so expensive. Good God.
Yeah, his solar power uses, or not solar power, his electric power is usually dependent on modularized vape batteries. So the same battery that's in a vape mod, it's really not an efficient way to do it. That many batteries in series, there's a lot of points for failure there. So what you really want is like an acid cell, like a regenerable acid cell battery. You have to add water to them every once in a while, but they're much cheaper, much more reliable, better long-term storage, so they last over the winter a little bit better. Musk systems really aren't even all that innovative. They're just covered in brushed aluminum and sold for a lot of money. An electric car, I prefer the bicycle, if I'm honest with you. Just something you can get away with if you localize a little bit more, and then you don't have to commute to work 12 hours. No. Yeah, get a bike, get a job near enough to get a bike. Grow your food so you don't need as much money. Become a little bit more independent. I mean, I'm one to talk. Like, if you look at my surroundings, I'm not in glamour here, but I'm also not I might as well just give all my money to grocery store.
Yeah, that's so defeatist.
I live in Michigan, actually, and I grow food occasionally. I don't have my garden up and running quite yet. I have a GoFundMe going. Well, I have a job. I just don't work 12 hours a day. I grow what I can. Ride a bike. The bike riding is true, though. I have a brightly colored riding jersey. But yeah, localized, buddy. It's all right. Localized. I feel like you have a shit job, dude.
That sounds horrible. Everything.
You don't have time to grow food, and you can't ride a bike to work.
Yeah.
But you work 24-hour shifts.
Jesus.
Where are you at that you're working a 24-hour shift? Leave.
I feel like we should start a rescue mission. Jesus. Oh wow.
Grow food at the house.
Yeah.
What you mean? You can have a garden at the firehouse. I know this for a fact. I've built a garden for a firehouse. But your whole point is what? Well, to give it away to the community, dog.
Also, why not grow food?
Grow food? Yeah. Why pay for food?
Yeah.
Do you know how much $200 a month is? $2,400. Genuinely.
It's not about putting stores out of business.
You don't have to put the... Just, why would you give away free food?
Like, you are reaching out to your community outside of your bubble, so this is like the...
Like, if you're giving free food to the community, why wouldn't you spend that? Like, $2,400? Do you have any idea the amount of food you can grow in a year for $2,400?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how much you can multiply what you give to the homeless for $2,400 and feed yourself? Like, it's not about putting the store out of business. It's about providing for your community in a healthier way.
Mm.
It's not about like putting the store out of business. It's about not having to go to the store for your food. It's not about them. It's about you.
It's just about making yourself more independent in a way that's really manageable for most people.
Like, you do it within your department.
Yeah.
Take that to the captain. Hey, why don't we start a community garden? You got space. I know you do. Grow some food. Do like a Sunday potluck thing in the community.
Grow some tomatoes, some chilies.
You know? Have you ever heard of pepper jelly? Can some pepper jelly. Community self-reliance and mutual aid. That's why. For community self-reliance, mutual aid. Build self-reliant, strong, healthy communities. People who know each other. To get us out of our bubbles so that we're working together as a community.
Mm-hmm.
Because buying food at the store is not living normally. But like, we have this myth. This feeds into this myth that the system that we have is normality.
Yeah.
The system is not normal. It is abnormal to extract wealth and to force people to work 24-hour shifts, 60 hours a week in order to like pay their rent.
Gardening your own food is less common in the last 50 years. Like, my grandparents gardened their own food, like, for survival. And probably most people's grandparents did. Also, like, not caring about the system when you go to the store, you're dependent massively on the system. Like, if anything happens, if there's a breakdown in the system, if there's a hiccup in the system, you're going to notice that with your food.
Yeah, that's actually, these are bad things.
Yeah.
I mean, you asked earlier how we changed the minds of billionaires.
Yeah.
Like, if you're dependent on the system, then there is no changing the system. If you're independent from the system, then you can stop caring about it.
Mm-hmm.
It won't change the system, but it'll change your life.
Yeah.
And you don't have to change the system. You just have to abstract yourself from it. All right, buddy. You know, for a fireman...
Yeah! I feel like I'm being trolled. Well,
you know, this is fine. Imagine it's burning down, and you're like, oh, why do I care about...
Why fight the fire? Come on.
The house isn't going to stop the fire. Why would I get a fire extinguisher out? It's not gonna change the fact that fire consumes everything. Like, come on, dude.
Fire exists. We might as well submit.
You might as well not try to fight. Okay. Okay. Why save people from burning buildings?
Exactly.
They're going to die eventually anyway.
Mm-hmm. We're all mortal, so there really is no changing the system.
Feed your family. All right, I'm done. Good chat, buddy.
That was lovely. I hope you have a good shift.
It was a fun chat.
Stay safe. That was amazing.
Oh, the band people.
Wait a second. Can I ban people?
You should be able to ban people. Click on his name and ban him.
Oh, wait a second. I'm looking for my other account. There we are. Oh, he'll just leave. Aw.
Deuces, buddy.
Have a lovely day. Have a good shift.
It's been real. Enjoy dying sad alone with a friend group. Because you won't start a potluck to meet some people who live next to you.
But he is going to feed the homeless, but not have a garden. That's a step too far.
Bye. Bye, only viewer. I know you're very proud of that fact. I don't care. How am I not a moderator of this channel?
You still need to send me your email address that you want to for streaming on this channel, because I still haven't given you the stream key.
I haven't sent you any of that.
Yeah. We need to do some admin. I feel like.
Yeah, maybe, but I want to channels. I want to make sure that I don't send you my private one, because
Also, by the way, there's 4 users in chat, so ha 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 ha.
Ha 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 ha.
Ha ha ha.
I'm the only one here. How do I have to send you my email?
An email address that's associated with a Twitch account. So if you don't want to use the one that you are using until now, just make an email, make a Twitch account. So that you can...
I don't know which one I'm using.
Okay. Also, don't send me now, because your email is going to show up on the... because we're streaming your Skype camera, and that shows the messages you send me.
I accidentally clicked a channel, and now I'm watching someone who I don't follow play a game that I don't watch. How did that happen, Twitch?
What's happening?
I don't know. Yeah, I'll send it to you eventually. I'll figure out which
excellent.
Which email I'm using.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll make one. That was a fun chat, though.
That was, yeah.
For a minute. So the existential dread, I can never do anything, so I might as well just die in this burning planet.
Yeah. Oh, let's not look at the Foundation for Deep Ecology there. Also, with all these articles about far right and ecology, the graphics department is just going all in.
Yeah.
They had wasn't there also one with boots with vegetables sticking out of them? No, that's not the one. But yeah, the graphics departments are having fun with those ones.
Yeah. They love the swastika leaf. Yeah, it's great. It's great. I've never seen that occur in nature, by the way.
No.
I've grown a handful of things.
I mean, I've seen leaves twist, but twist in 4 different directions? No.
I'm sorry, who comes to a gardening podcast to argue against gardening?
Oh.
channel is called Grow the Left.
Yep.
What do you think we're talking about?
Also, I can't get over the fact that he's a rescue worker and feeds the homeless, but is
Allegedly.
so
Allegedly.
willing to submit to an oppressive system, which is just what?
You can put me under press X to down.
Ah. Oh, whatever came of the Jacob Waltz triple X guy? Oh God!
Where you got that tattoo?
Yes. Whatever happened to that? Like, did people find out who the guy actually is and why he's doing what he's doing? Because like the Kamala Harris accuser, he came out saying like, yeah, they told me this was for the TV show and I had no idea that this was real.
Yeah, that's probably a lie though.
Yeah.
He probably knew full well what he was doing and thought it was funny.
Yeah.
That's my guess. There's an interesting one going on in America. So you remember the whole Robert Kraft like sex massage parlor thing? So Tom Brady plays for Robert Kraft's football team.
Oh,
Robert
American
Kraft,
football. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I know
Robert
who Tom Brady is. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Owner got caught with a sex ring.
Oh.
And so Tom Brady, his star player,
right?
The Tom Brady,
yeah,
is in an internet skit where he comes out of a strip mall massage parlor just looking insanely relaxed and relieved. He's like, what a wonderful day. And it just looks so good, right? And it's clearly like him taking a jab at that whole sexcapade scandal thing.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Hilarious. Fantastic. 10 out of 10 trolls.
Really puts paid to the idea that billionaires are billionaires because they work so hard. Like all the extracurricular like flying back and forth from islands and having weird massage parlors and all that stuff. Like, yeah,
nope, that's work.
Sure.
Nope, that's work. Yep, that was a business meeting.
Sure.
All right, well, it is now 1 a.m. here.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take off. I'm gonna go to bed.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure, though.
It's been a really good chat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Exactly. Bye.